Welcome to the Wokepedia podcast. I'm your host, Micah Sample, and I'm joined today by two wonderful compatriots here. Pastor Sam Jones, how are you doing today? And Kyle, how are you doing today? Sam, you go first.
You know, I'm doing much better now that you did the introduction that I could not do. For some reason, just could not get it going. So I am thankful. We are a team here, and so I am doing well. Thanks for having us on here today, Micah.
Yeah, absolutely, Sam. Kyle, how are you doing today? I'm glad that we got through that intro finally.
Well, is that the fourth or fifth time's a charm? But no, I'm doing really good. It's a pleasure to be here as always. Although I'm still curious about these two wonderful compatriots that you were mentioning, because I only see the three of us here.
Yeah, that would be you and Pastor Sam, believe it or not, because those are the only two other people here besides myself.
No, let's not start lying to the audience here.
Oh, okay, whatever. You're too humble. But anyway, welcome to the Wokepedia podcast again, guys. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all of our listeners. Today, we've got a very, very special episode for you. Pastor Sam, do you want to go ahead and break down what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Kyle might be humble, but I'm absolutely not. And so before we even get started, you should give us a 5-star review. Go ahead and give us a 5-star review on YouTube, on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google, wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening to us. You need to go ahead and give us a 5-star review, and you need to click that subscribe button. Go ahead and click that like button too on YouTube. That'd be great because we are definitely worth it. That's for sure. But most importantly, I want to tell you that you can go and find out more from Wokepedia at enemieswithinthechurch.com. Once again, it's enemieswithinthechurch.com. You can find all of our articles, all of our stuff there. Go ahead and check us out at enemieswithinthechurch.com. But today, we do have a special episode and a special guest. We have Kay Rubacek on, and I probably mispronounced her name to begin this because I think I said Kay Rubacek, but it is Kay Rubacek. And she recently has written this book called Who Are China's Walking Dead? And so we talk a little bit about that. We get to hear about her story and really about how communism and statism has really impacted our culture and how we can go and stand up against that. It is really a great interview. And so I really hope that you enjoy it.
Well, absolutely. This is going to be a great interview. This is someone who has actually had hands-on experience when it comes to communism and the effects of that. I mean, someone who was held as a political prisoner, for goodness sake. So you guys are going to want to stay tuned and stick around for this episode. I assure you of that. Unless you are a communist, in fact, because I would imagine that actual communists would hate today's episode. You know, one of the things that I think that we should be mindful of as we go forward with this is the fact that communism isn't just relegated to other nations. This is something that's happening in our own. And so we want to hear your guys' stories. First and foremost, contact us at contactwokepedia@gmail.com. If you guys are having stories of communists or Marxist or cultural or economic Marxist ideology infiltrating your church or infiltrating your Christian college or other Christian institution, if you're seeing your leaders go woke, tell us at Wokepedia and we will get the message out.
And joining us today with Wokepedia podcast is Kay Rubacek. Now, Kay Rubacek, she has gone and is an author and award-winning filmmaker. She's a distinguished documentary journalist. Her work has appeared on such platforms as Epoch Times, Amazon, the Rise TV, PBS, pretty much anywhere. Her work has gone out and she has impacted a ton of people. And I am excited to have her on today and for her to tell us just a little bit about her story. She did recently come out with a book called Who Are China's Walking Dead? And you need to go and to check this book out. But this book really goes into the idea of well, I don't know why I'm telling you about the book here. We've got the author right on. Kay, how are you doing today? Do you want to tell us just a little bit about your book and also tell us your story in your family story in relation to communism?
Thanks, Sam. Sure. I'm really glad to be here talking with you and appreciate the introduction too. It's always nice hearing someone else. You know, I like to tell my story, but it's nice to hear how other people take that in, and it's also a good skill to be able to listen and learn from others. So I did that in my book. Is I listened to a few hundred hours of interviews with more than 100 survivors of communism, and mostly from China for this particular book, though I have interviewed people from lots of different regimes. One of the reasons for that is that my family escaped communism. My great-grandparents escaped Russia under Soviet communism in the 1920s. My father was born and raised in China as a young Russian boy. And when he was 14, after the Chinese Communist Party had taken over, he had to escape. At that time, they had so-called the Great Famine. And I say that in quotation marks because this is kind of a communist term where they make us think something's good. They really water down or sugarcoat something that was, that was a time where 45 million people died of man-made famine because the Communist Party created that, under their policies. Meanwhile, they're sending aid to other countries. So we start to see when we look at our time now, we start to wonder why there's some strange policies going on. Why are we sending foreign aid overseas when there's people on our streets who are suffering, while our gas prices are going through the roof, while our groceries are doubling, tripling in price? Mm-hmm. This is not the first time. So looking at my family's history, so my family had to escape China under the Communist Party, and they came to Australia, and I was born and raised there, and I met my husband, who had escaped also another communist country, the former Czechoslovakia in Eastern Europe under the under communism there before the Berlin Wall fell. So wow. Myself, I spent a day in a Chinese prison. I was a human rights activist, and I was surrounded by police and thrown into prison for holding one word. I did nothing wrong. I broke no law. But I held a word on Tiananmen Square on a banner. That word was compassion. For that, I was put into a prison. I was interrogated violently. I was abused. I was screamed at. I witnessed all these sorts of propaganda and torture, not torture techniques. I've heard all of those. I witnessed more interrogation and violent techniques, but I did witness a lot of propaganda techniques face to face with the police officers. And it was just absolutely eye-opening to see for myself what communism does in a nation where my father was born and raised. And so my family found freedom. We didn't start to see what's now become really there's a lot of full-blown socialist ideology that we're seeing all around us now here in the US and Australia. We saw that with the lockdowns. But I did see that early on. I saw that more than about 20 years ago when I was in college and doing a fine arts degree before I went in, became a filmmaker. But I really was forced to undergo indoctrination under socialist indoctrination in that course. And I couldn't accept it because I just realized something's not right with this. Why am I being taught these things? Why am I not being taught art? Why am I being taught propaganda? And I really started to question things. So I've been on this journey for a few decades now, but what I realized now, having 2 teenage children myself, I realized that my family has been fortunate, very fortunate to have faith to hold them together, strong family ties, but also a country to run to. We don't have that anymore. There is no place left to run. America has always been the beacon, but around the world, the concept of the freedom in America has been pushed down. I saw that in Australia because I was taught to love McDonald's, love Coca-Cola, love Hollywood, but hate America. Mm. And this is part of this plan to break apart the American state and the American values, really. And so that's very concerning for me because I want to make sure and do the best I can that I raise the alarm because I have the access to this information, but I want a future for my children, and I really value the American freedoms and the founding of this nation. So I think it's something that's definitely worth defending.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. And wow, what a story! You were talking about how you were holding up one word, and that was compassion. And one of the things that I find really interesting about communists and socialists in the United States is that they oftentimes like to talk about how they're motivated by compassion. What do you think of that? Do you think that communism, I'm guessing that you don't think that communism is motivated by compassion. What do you think it is motivated by, if not compassion? That's what they say it is. So what is it really that motivates this?
Oh, what such a fantastic question. Could you imagine if we could have this type of conversation with just regular Americans and just ask those questions? It's so important. I absolutely agree with you, because these terms get taken out of context. Our language is being intentionally changed. In my book, China's Walking Dead, Who Are China's Walking Dead, I even have a glossary of communist euphemisms at the back, and it's not exhaustive. It's just a small list of basically every time when I was writing my book, I'd come across another term like this, the Great Famine. And I'm like, it's not great. I can't say that. I'm lying. And they call a massacre, they call it a political incident. It's a lie. It's mass killing of people. And so this is the language where things start to get distorted. And we really have to be very careful with that, because now you in the US, it's like, oh, don't say the word woman. Oh, you may get into trouble. This is something, or the word compassion. I'm not being compassionate to you. And it starts to, but really where you can start to see where is the communist ideology is where there's compassion with restrictions. I'm compassionate to you, but not you. You don't deserve it. That's when when division comes up, and we start to accept that someone is less worthy, that there's groups of people that are less worthy of being human beings. And that's what communism does. They always set those divisions up, and they create divisions where someone says, you're not compassionate. But it's not Christian compassion. It's not true compassion. It's twisted evil ideology, just using this against us, trying to trick us. It's psychological. They love using psychological principles to manipulate us, where they'll say, I want to be compassionate to the earth, for example. That means you may have to die. You may have to give up your private property. You may have to stop using power. We may just turn off your smart meters on your house. So like what happened in California today, where you cannot access air conditioning anymore. That's compassion. So we have to be careful with language.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's remarkable that they're doing that in California. I actually hadn't even heard of that until you just now said that, but it sounds like California to me. So, you're talking about them utilizing this kind of language, and essentially you're bringing up the topic of propaganda, and you've been through it. And in my own limited experience, I've been through some of that as well, but just on a Christian college campus, or supposed to be a Christian college campus anyway. I went to Indiana Wesleyan University, and I saw all of my peers virtually bow the knee to socialism, to cultural Marxism, to economic Marxism, all stripes of Marxism. It was just a fad there. I mean, I saw people who would have Soviet flags in their dorm rooms, and they would have the socialist fist on their shirts, and they would have a ton of socialist or Marxist slogans, slapped to the back of their computer on stickers. And this was encouraged by professors at a Christian university, supposedly Christian. What would you say, though, to someone who is a young person in a college kind of situation where they're experiencing this kind of manipulation, this kind of brainwashing tactic that you're talking about constantly 24/7, and they're starting to find that Marxism is attractive to them? Because I don't think that in the US we've had it to the extent that we've really gotten to see or reap the full consequences of communism like it's been in other countries. What would you say to someone, to a student who really doesn't have much world experience or even much knowledge of history, who is being attracted to these kinds of ideas?
Tyranny always comes on a silver platter. It's the easy way out. And that's the devil just trying to tempt you. And it's easy, but you have to, whether it's tyranny or freedom, both of them come at a price. You have to pay something freedom, you usually have to pay earlier. It's harder work. But for tyranny, you pay later. And it is hard, but you also find with a lot of trends, especially for the youth, we see the trends going around on TikTok and things like that, but they change. And if we can think a little more long term, then we can hold out a little longer through some of these trends. Because if you notice, okay, TikTok's got this trend going on, and then the next month, maybe the next day, there's a new trend. So if we can try not to be sucked into that, because something that I talk about in my new book is that this short-term thinking is a phenomenon that we have is being really pushed on us with our phones, where people aren't reading books anymore. They're not turning pages. They're not thinking about the author of who wrote this. And do I really want to spend a few hours with this person? I don't know. Whereas with this technology of just swiping on this tiny little narrow screen, you see a few words, and maybe you don't even see a few words. You just see a picture. And then you swipe and there's something else. Everything's out of context. And so if we get sucked into only short-term thinking, because it's very hard to avoid that, we lose long-term thinking. Now, what does tyranny have? These communists, their plans are 100 years. Xi Jinping, the dictator of China, last year just stated, we have completed our first 100-year plan. Ready for the next one. He said that publicly. And ready for the next big socialist, I can't remember what he termed, progressive socialism. Yay. They are thinking long-term, and they want us to just be jumping around with these shiny lights and being, oh, new trend there, oh, new T-shirt there, oh, sticker. So I think for young people, you got to just hold on a little longer, think a little longer. Look at some goals, set some goals a little longer. Find some people you can talk to who they may not have long-term goals, but you can set them and you can tell them about them, and they'll remind you and they'll hold you accountable. Start talking about these things, because this may seem really simple, but actually it's fundamental, because psychologically they want us to just be jumping around, shiny thing, shiny thing, shiny thing, and just follow, spend money here, spend money there. And we get disconnected from our family, we get disconnected from our faith and from our history and our roots. We forget history when we think short term. So that's what I would say, is just hold out a little longer. You really can do it. It may be painful for a little bit, but it's really worth that pain, because you're going to get the fruits of it afterwards. I believe that.
Very, very good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
One of the things that when you're talking about being a long-term versus a short-term thinker, it is kind of terrifying, because our youth today, by youth, I might use that word a little bit broader, even into the mid-30s, it seems like, is youth today. But people aren't even thinking, what are they going to be when they grow up? I've noticed when asking children, they're like, I don't know, they haven't thought about that. But when you don't think long-term, you also inherently have to become dependent on somebody who has the goods. You become dependent on that. You lose your independence. And so, I mean, that is just, that is so dangerous. Have you noticed any other trends that we should really be watching out for and trying to correct within ourselves, but also within those who are raising in the next generation?
Oh, there's so many, and especially with, I agree with you on with youth being, I've got teenagers, and it's hard to say exactly when people are going to leave the nest. And I mean, there's people in their 20s and 30s that are staying at home. Video games is a trend where we can see, again, it's related to technology, and I'm not against technology. Technology is what it is. It's here. And we can utilize it for good. But if technology starts to control us, then we really, if we allow it to control us, then we are putting ourselves in danger. And so with video games, you look at, there's a big chunk of life that's lost from people who are just connected to video games for that time. And studies have shown that young adults, especially young males, more subject to this, more prone to this, is that they often are spending a lot of time on the video games, and then they come out and they realize because we do come out of that. We do come out of youth. Most people do come out of it. And that's a positive thing. We do make that transition, but it is happening later. But if you come out of that transition and then you realize, wow, I didn't really study. I didn't earn any money. There is a big concern that, they won't get a good job because they don't have any work experience to show. And they don't have the life experience then to teach their kids of what they did to go through those hardships that like our parents went through of like, yeah, it was really hard getting a job. It was really hard going to college. It was really hard. Everyone goes through hardship. But when you come out the other side, then you realize, wow, I did it. I did it. And that fear of suffering is what we're being forced to think, accept and be like, well, you don't want to suffer anything. So you better just allow the government to make that decision for you. Allow the government to pay for you for that instead. And that's when we think suffering is bad. But we know from the Bible, we know from history, we know that is human life is hard. But that's if you have that long-term view where you know that there's something afterward, then you can accept that there are challenges here and you can accept them with a smile. So I think, again, it does come back to that long-term thinking, but I think that affects so much of our life. And we're going to be seeing the results of that even more over the next few decades, but we still have a chance to kind of stem that tide, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point that we're afraid to go and to suffer. It used to be said that there were hills worth dying for. But now I think we are in a time when people won't even find hills that they're willing to suffer for, and they're willing to go into exchange their freedom, exchange everything that they have in order to go and to get a reprieve from temporary suffering, and not realizing that they're really prolonging, maybe not even really prolonging, but they're heaping upon themselves greater suffering. The more we go into debt as a nation in the United States, the more power that we slowly hand over to the government, the more we're actually going to be suffering, even though it might seem like we're getting out of that suffering. I remember specifically at the beginning of COVID 2020, somebody pleading with me saying, hey, will you just stop speaking up? Will you just stop doing this? And his whole motive was he came back and he said, look, I just want to get my sports back. And I love sports. I'm a big sports fan, but I was sitting here going like, I will gladly sacrifice watching sports or enjoying them in order to go and to have our freedoms. But do you see that trend? And do you see that where can we get our hope from in order to get people to be willing to suffer for what is worth suffering for?
One really important aspect of that is the family, and the family is it's a core family. It's a core unit of society, and the communists have known that from the get-go, and it's the biggest block between them having control over us as individuals. Because when they go directly to you or me or anyone else, it's really hard to say no. But when you have a family, you have a family unit, you've got people to talk to. You've got differences of opinions because you're not choosing each other based on, oh, I like you better today, and then tomorrow night I like you better. And then it's longer term relationships. It's formed not only by blood, but who put you in your mother's womb and who put you into that family with those parents. That is not man-made. That's miraculous. And communist scientists are not able to, describe that at all at any length yet. So the family suffers together. And they share tribulations, they share trials, and they grow in strength. And that starts from childbirth. A mother and a child, a mother suffers through childbirth. It's just how it is. And that suffering, when you come out on the other end and you see this just amazing little miraculous little being come out of you, and you think, oh my goodness, what you forget the suffering. But you're connected in a way that it's very hard to describe because I really think it's quite miraculous. And those things bond us. The family bonds are extremely powerful. And the only way tyranny can really have control over us is if they break those bonds. But if we hold fast to those bonds, then as a core little family unit, and I'm not talking and saying it must be mother, father, one brother, one sister. I don't care what it is. There needs to be someone in the world that needs you. If you're targeted for brainwashing, if you're targeted for manipulation, and you have no one in your mind that is worth living for, then, or worth suffering for, or that you care about, you're just going to be, psychological studies show that you're just going to be whipped around like in the wind. You're just going to be flown around, and you can just land anywhere. You've given yourself over to tyranny. But the family unit is extremely powerful. Strong families form strong communities, form strong societies, form strong nations. And that's the core thing. And that's exactly what tyranny, communists, have all been trying to break down from the very beginning in every society. And but we have the power of being able to work harder on those relationships. You think about if you really knew that having a stronger family relationship could actually protect yourself or someone in your family, whether they love you or hate you, doesn't matter. You could be protecting them from being brainwashed. Really, that's what it comes down to. And I think that gives us something on the human world that's worth living for, that's worth suffering for. And then, of course, we have what's beyond, and the greater faith and what's beyond this life. But, we still got to look at what's here right in front of us. And that's our family. And yeah, it's not easy, but that's life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, God instituted and ordained the family as something that he wanted to see throughout the entire world. He told man in the beginning, essentially, to go forth and multiply and to create family. And that's really, really important. That's really, really key. And I'm appreciative of what you're saying here. You're talking about a kind of forward thinking, generational thinking that people just seem to have lost, especially people my age. I talked about college earlier, and I noticed that a lot of the time students would enter in and they would have had a somewhat conservative background, maybe not the most solid possible conservative background, but then they go to college and they think, wow, I'm finally free of my family. That's the kind of mindset that our culture encourages, is this idea that, well, you're finally free to go do what you want to do and to be someone else. And so in order to be cool, you've got to make that distinction between yourself and your parents ideologically. But if students or if prospective students, if children who are going into the college age would just think this way in terms of, well, actually, I love my family. I want my family to not only survive, but to thrive in the way that God intended. And I'm a part of that. That would go such a long way. So thanks for bringing that up. And I think that's really, really important stuff. I think that every student in the United States should hear that, to be quite frank.
And on to your point, it's not that we change. It's just normal in growing up that we go through that process, especially probably men more than women. They've found statistically that there is that challenge of looking for authority and wanting to become your own person, your own man. And that's great. That makes you who you become as an adult. But if we have the family as a foundation, and fathers are extremely important in that role, because it's a lot harder for mothers to play that in the role. But there's states that are really penalizing mothers for getting married. So a lot of single mothers stay single mothers, and a lot of children are without fathers. And that is really something that's really, really difficult. Whereas you can go to college and you can go and have a crazy time, but you've got someone back at home to come back to that's going to be maybe say, why did you do that? But then they're going to make you a meal, or they're going to take you out and to play, watch a baseball game or something. You just know that they're going to be there for you, even when you mess up, especially when you mess up. And when you say, I really messed up, and, can we go out and have a beer? It's those types of things where you just know you've got someone to rely on that's outside of your friendship group and outside of your college group. So I think we can still get through college. We can get through these challenges of growing up and becoming adults, because I think they're always going to be there. But family is the foundation, as you said. You know, that was made very clear in the Bible that is, and you can see that in every culture, family is the core unit. And I think we got to come back to that no matter what the challenges are.
Amen. Absolutely. We do need to come back to the family. We do need to stay solid and build strong family units. And I just want to thank you so much, Kay, for coming on to the show today. It's been absolutely great. And so I want to remind everybody, go and check out Who Are China's Walking Dead. This is Kay's new book, and you can find it at kyleatwokepedia.com. Once again, that's Kayleatwokepedia.com. You can get it there. That's the place where you can get it, and you can get it signed. Go ahead and check that out. And also, one of the things that I just want to remind people with what we've been talking about with family, technology was brought up. One of the biggest things that I always promote is go and spend more time around your your dining room table than you do in front of your TV. Spend more time as a family around the table. In fact, if you really want to get down to it, spend more money on your table than you do your TV, so that way you know that you value it, and you'll be sitting there looking and saying, why am I not investing time at that table? But thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks for listening to Wokepedia Podcast. You can go ahead and subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, if you're, from that Gen Z generation or whatever. Whatever you might want to go and do, you can go ahead and subscribe to us. Give us 5 stars, because we're worth all 5 of them. We don't want 4-star reviews, only 5-star reviews. So go ahead and give us those 5 stars. And remember to email us at contactwokepedia@gmail.com. Once again, it's contactwokepedia@gmail.com. And I think that's all the things I'm supposed to say. So have a great day and keep standing for the truth. And Micah, are you going to say it?
Don't go woke.